All right, let's go ahead and start our unit on literal equations. So this is literal equations part A. Our goal is I can solve a one-step literal equation. All right, so let's take a look at some vocabulary. A formula is a concise rule, fact, or principle expressed using symbols. A variable is a math symbol, usually a letter that represents an unknown value. Coefficient is a numerical or constant factor that multiplies a variable in an algebraic expression, usually positioned directly in front of the variable. So like if I had 3x, something like 3x, that 3 would be considered the coefficient. And then a constant is a value that will remain fixed, is not being multiplied by any variables. So for example, 3 is a constant. Any number you can think of is a constant. Okay. All right. So what is a literal equation? This is an equation containing two or more variables that represents a formula or relationship between quantities. These are unlike traditional equations, where you often solve for a variable in terms of numbers. You will solve one variable in terms of other variables. Okay? So let's take a look and kind of compare these side by side. So in a traditional sense, if I'm looking at this problem right here on the left, first thing I would do that we learned in our last unit is I would minus 5 on both sides. Okay? And then I'd have 3x, this would cancel out, equals 14 minus 5 is 9. Now, if we come over here to the literal side, it's going to be the same thing. Our goal is still the same. Our goal is to get x by itself. Now, they could ask you to solve for a different variable. They could ask you to solve for a or b. So it depends what they're asking. We're going to say they're asking for x. So just like on the left side, we're going to subtract b from both sides, which makes it gone here. And we have ax equals, now I don't know what c minus b is because they're variables, so I'm just going to write c minus b. So on the left side, we have 3x equals 9. On the right side, it would look like ax equals c minus b. Okay, come back over here to the left side. Next, I would divide by 3. Now I'd have x equals 9 divided by 3 is 3. And there I solved the equation for x, and it is a value, it's a number. Now if I come back over to the right side, if I want x by itself, once again I'm just going to divide by a on one side and a on the other side. So here, over here, the 3's canceled out. Here the a's are going to cancel out. So I'm left with x equals c minus b, because that's what I did on the first step, divided by a, because that's the second step. And then I would be done. So I could use this as a formula if I figured out something and I always wanted to solve for x. This is how they find formulas. Is first they solve the literal equation, and then you can just plug things in to help us find the actual numbers if you were using it as a formula. So it's the same thing as you've been solving equations. We just have letters the whole time instead of having an x equals some number. So here's some types of literal equations. Often you'll see that they are formulas. So y equals mx plus b. The p equals 2l plus 2w. That's defining the perimeter of a rectangle. Area equals 1/2 base times height. That's the area of a triangle. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. That's the Pythagorean theorem. A equals pi r squared. That's your formula for the area of a circle. There are all types of literal equations. You're going to see them in physics. You're going to see them in chemistry. You're going to see them in math. You're going to see them in stats. You will see literal equations all over the place. So it's kind of good to get used to being able to solve these to help you set up the future equations and formulas where it'll be easier for you. So here's some steps to solving one-step literal equations. Identify the variable you're solving for. Identify the operation that's taking place. Use the inverse operation to undo whatever's happening. Solve for the variable, and then you can check your solution. So if we have, let's say we had a plus b equals c, and we are solving for b. Okay, so we want b to be by itself. All right, so we need to get rid of that a. This is a positive a, so I'm going to subtract a from this side and from this side, so it cancels out. And I'm left with b on the left side. And on the right side, I'm left with c minus a. Now, you have to write it in that order. That's important that you do c minus a. Subtraction, order matters. Addition, order does not matter. But subtraction absolutely matters. So to find b, I would just do c minus a. That's an example of solving a literal equation. Okay, d equals r times t. All right, let's solve for r. Solve for r. Okay, so we want this to be by itself. All right, so what is connected to it? There's a t, and it's connected through multiplication. So the inverse of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide by t, which allows those to cancel each other out. We divide the left side by t, and now r is all by itself. So we get r equals d divided by t. Would be my solution for solving for r. Okay, d equals m over v. All right, let's solve for m. All right, so we want m to be by itself. So we need to isolate that, so we need to get rid of the v. This is divided by v. This is m divided by v, so the inverse operation would be multiplied by v, which allows me to cancel out my v's. Then I also have to multiply over here. And m is now by itself, so I'm going to say m equals d times v. Now, order doesn't matter with multiplication, so if you want to write it as m equals v times d, you could also do that as well. So there is how I would solve for m in this case. Okay, area equals length times width. A equals L times W. Let's solve for L. All right, so this is L times W. So I'm going to divide both sides by W. That gets canceled out. And so I get area divided by W equals L. And you could rewrite it the other way. You could say L equals area times W. Just so you know when you're doing your assignment, if you have capital letters, you need to keep them as capital letters when you write it down in your answer. Capital letters are important. Capital variables, you need to make sure the capital, if they give it to you as a capital, leave it as a capital, or you would get it wrong if you changed it to a lowercase. So just make sure whatever, if it's uppercase or lowercase, leave it that way the whole time as you're solving the equation. Okay, S equals D divided by T. Let's solve for T this time. This one's a little bit more tricky. Okay, so in this case, I need to get rid of the D. Okay, and that's kind of hard because D's actually on the top and D's on the bottom. So I can't just times by D to get it to go away. Okay, because we can only times by what's on the bottom. So this is going to be an extra step, actually. So this one's going to be a two-step equation. Because I need to times both sides by t first. And that cancels out, and I get ts equals d. And now t and s are being multiplied. So I'm going to divide by the s. And I get t equals d divided by s. Okay, so if you're ever trying to solve for something that's on the bottom, you're actually going to have to end up doing two steps at least to be able to solve that equation. Okay, so there is some examples of literal equations. Part A, I can solve one-step literal equations. Go ahead and take a look at your assignment and reach out if you have any questions.